The sun hung low on the horizon, painting the Arizona desert in shades of amber and crimson as the stagecoach rumbled along the dusty trail. Inside, Eleanor Hastings sat rigidly upright, her emerald green dress somehow maintaining its pristine appearance despite the relentless jostle of the wooden wheels over uneven ground. She clutched her reticule tightly, aware of the small fortune in jewelry hidden within its silk lining. The pieces had belonged to her grandmother, and she was transporting them to San Francisco where she hoped to start a new life, far from the disappointments of Boston society. Across from her sat a weathered cowboy named Jack Morrison, his brown hat pulled low over sun-darkened features. He had boarded at the last station, saying little beyond a polite nod of greeting. His eyes, however, told a different story. They were constantly alert, scanning the landscape through the coach window with an intensity that made Eleanor both nervous and strangely reassured. There was something capable about this man, something that suggested he had seen trouble before and knew how to handle it. The other passengers included a portly merchant who had fallen asleep almost immediately, his snores competing with the creaking of the coach, and a young couple heading west to claim a homestead. They whispered excitedly to each other, their faces glowing with dreams of the future. Eleanor envied them their optimism, their belief that tomorrow would be better than today. As dusk began to settle over the desert, transforming the red rocks into looming shadows, Jack suddenly stiffened. His hand moved imperceptibly toward the revolver at his hip. Eleanor noticed the movement and felt her heart begin to race. Before she could ask what was wrong, the sharp crack of a rifle shot split the evening air. The stagecoach lurched violently as the driver pulled hard on the reins. Horses whinnied in protest, and the sleeping merchant tumbled forward with a startled oath. Through the window, Eleanor could see riders emerging from behind the rock formations, at least 5 of them, their faces covered with bandanas, weapons drawn and gleaming in the fading light. Jack was on his feet instantly, crouching low as another shot rang out. He moved to Eleanor's side of the coach with surprising speed for a man of his size. His voice, when he spoke, was calm and steady, a stark contrast to the chaos erupting around them. "Stay behind me until it's done," he said, positioning himself between Eleanor and the window. There was no bravado in his tone, no false heroics, just a simple statement of fact. "Don't move, don't make a sound, and whatever happens, keep your head down." The young woman from the homesteading couple began to sob quietly, and her husband wrapped his arms around her, his own face pale with fear. The merchant had recovered from his tumble and was now pressed against the opposite wall, his earlier pomposity replaced by naked terror. Outside, rough voices shouted commands. The driver and his shotgun guard were ordered down from their perch. Eleanor could hear the thud of boots hitting the ground, followed by the metallic click of weapons being cocked. The bandits were professional, their movements coordinated, their voices confident. This was not their first robbery. The coach door was yanked open violently, and a man with cold gray eyes visible above his bandana peered inside. His gaze swept over the passengers, calculating, assessing. When his eyes landed on Eleanor's dress and jewelry, they narrowed with interest. "Well, well," he drawled, his voice carrying a hint of education beneath the roughness. "Looks like we hit the motherlode, boys. Got ourselves a fancy lady traveling in style." He gestured with his pistol. "Out. All of you. Nice and slow." Jack moved first, keeping his body angled to shield Eleanor as much as possible. His hands were raised, but Eleanor noticed they weren't raised high. He was ready to move if an opportunity presented itself. The others followed, the young couple clinging to each other, the merchant whimpering softly. The desert floor was still warm from the day's heat, and Eleanor's fine shoes were entirely unsuitable for the rocky terrain. She stumbled slightly as she stepped down, and Jack's hand shot out to steady her. The brief contact was reassuring, solid, real in a moment that felt increasingly surreal. The bandits had positioned themselves strategically, covering all angles. Their leader, the gray-eyed man, circled the group slowly, his pistol never wavering. 2 others were already ransacking the luggage strapped to the top of the coach, tossing bags and trunks to the ground where they burst open, spilling contents across the dust. "Jewelry, money, watches, anything valuable," the leader commanded. "Hand it over, and nobody needs to get hurt. Make this difficult, and my boys here might get nervous." "You don't want them getting nervous." The merchant fumbled with his watch chain, his fingers trembling so badly he could barely unhook it. The young husband emptied his pockets, producing a few crumpled bills and some coins. His wife removed her simple wedding band with tears streaming down her face. When the bandit reached Eleanor, his eyes gleamed with greedy anticipation. "That's a mighty fine necklace you're wearing, miss. And those earrings. Hand them over, along with that bag you're holding so tight." Eleanor's fingers tightened on her reticule. Everything she owned, everything she needed to start over, was in that bag. Without it, she would arrive in San Francisco with nothing, dependent on the charity of distant relatives who had already made clear their reluctance to help a scandalous divorcee. "I said hand it over," the bandit repeated, his voice hardening. He stepped closer, and Eleanor could smell whiskey on his breath, see the dirt crusted under his fingernails as he reached for the bag. That's when Jack moved. It happened so fast that Eleanor barely registered the motion. One moment Jack was standing still, the next his fist connected with the bandit's jaw with a sickening crunch. The man staggered backward, his pistol discharging harmlessly into the air. Before the other bandits could react, Jack had grabbed Eleanor and pulled her behind an overturned trunk, his own weapon finally drawn. "Stay behind me until it's done," he repeated, his voice still maddeningly calm as bullets began to fly. The next few minutes were a blur of gunfire and shouting. Jack returned fire with careful precision, his shots deliberate and accurate. Eleanor pressed herself against the trunk, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She could hear the driver and his guard joining the fight, their weapons adding to the chaos. One of the bandits fell, clutching his shoulder. Another's horse reared in panic, throwing its rider. The leader, recovered from Jack's punch, was bellowing orders, but his men were already breaking formation. The easy robbery turned into a genuine gunfight. Jack never wavered. He moved with an economy of motion that spoke of experience, of battles fought and survived. When his revolver clicked empty, he reloaded with practiced speed, never taking his eyes off the enemy. A bullet struck the trunk inches from Eleanor's head, sending splinters flying, but Jack shifted to block her more completely, taking the next shot meant for her in the thick leather of his vest. The impact knocked him back a step, but he steadied himself and kept firing. The tide was turning. Faced with more resistance than they had anticipated, the remaining bandits were retreating. Their leader fired a few more shots in frustration, then wheeled his horse around and spurred it toward the rocks. His surviving men followed, their curses fading into the growing darkness. For a long moment after the thunder of hoofbeats died away, nobody moved. Then, slowly, Jack lowered his weapon and turned to Eleanor. His eyes scanned her quickly, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Eleanor shook her head, unable to speak. Her entire body was trembling, the reality of what had just happened washing over her in waves. Jack had saved her life. This stranger had put himself between her and danger without hesitation, had taken a bullet meant for her. The driver approached, checking on his passengers. The young couple was unharmed, clinging to each other and crying with relief. The merchant had fainted and needed to be revived. The shotgun guard had taken a graze to his arm but declared himself fit to continue. As the adrenaline faded, Eleanor found her voice. "You saved us," she said to Jack, her words inadequate to express what she felt. "That bullet, it could have." Jack shrugged, checking his revolver before holstering it. "It's what needed doing. Besides," he added, touching the place where the bullet had struck his vest, "leather's thick. I've had worse." Eleanor looked down at her reticule, still clutched in her white-knuckled grip. Her grandmother's jewelry was safe. Her future was safe. Because a stranger had decided that protecting her was worth risking his life. As they boarded the stagecoach again to continue their journey, the night fully dark now, Eleanor sat beside Jack rather than across from him. The desert had taught her something about the difference between the polished gentlemen of Boston society and real men who acted when action was needed. "Thank you," she said quietly as the coach began to move again. "For everything. For staying between me and danger until it was done." Jack tipped his hat to her, a hint of a smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "My pleasure, ma'am. Besides, something tells me those jewels you're protecting are important. Hope they're worth the trouble." Eleanor smiled, a genuine smile that felt strange after months of social obligations and false pleasantries. They're my future. And thanks to you, I still have one. The stagecoach rolled on through the night, carrying its passengers toward tomorrow, carrying Eleanor toward a new beginning that she had almost lost at dusk when the bandits came. She would never forget the cowboy who had stood between her and catastrophe, whose simple words had become a promise kept against all odds.